For 5 years, my husband's best friend Megan was a third person in our marriage. Everyone told me I was crazy, that I was insecure. They were right about one thing. I was crazy. Crazy enough to expose them all in front of the entire family. But I never imagined my revenge would uncover a secret buried for 30 years. This is a story about finding your voice when everyone tries to silence you. If you believe in the power of truth, you're in the right place. The sizzle of onions and garlic in hot olive oil was a sound that used to mean comfort. It was the sound of an evening winding down. The sound of home. But lately, it just felt like noise. I was stirring a risotto, the kind that needs constant attention. When I heard Tyler's car pull into the driveway, my shoulders, which I hadn't realized were tensed up to my ears, dropped an inch. Another day over with. He came in, dropped his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door with a clatter, and loosened his tie. "Hey. On," he mumbled. Walking past me to the fridge, he pulled out a beer, the cap hissing as he twisted it off. "Rough day?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the pan. "The usual," he said. Before I could ask more, the front door opened again. No knock. There was only one person who did that. "I come bearing gifts," Megan's voice, always a little too loud for our small kitchen, bounced off the walls. She swept in, a cloud of a floral perfume that always made my nose itch. Holding up a bottle of red wine like a trophy, she breezed past me with a quick, "Hey, Nicole." Her eyes already locked on my husband. "Megan, what are you doing here?" Tyler's face broke into a genuine smile. The first one I'd seen all day. "Saved you from a boring Tuesday night." "Obviously." She laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck in a hug that lasted just a second too long. "I brought that Malbec you love." She said it to him, but her words felt aimed at me. I know what he loves. I was the one standing over a hot stove making his favorite meal. But her gesture, so simple and yet so invasive, made me feel like a stranger in my own home. I watched as she leaned against the counter, right in the space I needed to work, and launched into a story about her day at the office. Tyler was captivated, laughing at all the right moments. I just kept stirring the risotto, the wooden spoon making a rhythmic, scraping sound against the bottom of the pan, round and round. It was the only thing I felt in control of. The smell of her wine, rich and fruity, suddenly transported me back a year. We were on vacation. A rare trip, just the two of us, to a cabin by a lake in Vermont. The air was crisp. The leaves were turning brilliant shades of orange and red. And for a few days, I felt like I had my husband back. One evening, sitting by the fire with a similar bottle of wine, I finally worked up the courage. "Tyler," I began, my voice quiet. "Can we talk about Megan?" He sighed, the sound muffled by the crackling fire. "What about her?" "It's just, she's around a lot. Sometimes I feel like she's a third person in our marriage. I feel like there's no space that's just for us." He took a long sip of his wine before answering, not looking at me but at the flames. "Honey, you're overthinking it. You know that. She's been my best friend since we were 5. She's like my sister." He finally turned to me, his expression a frustrating mix of pity and annoyance. "I need you to not be insecure about this. Please." And just like that, the conversation was over. I was insecure. I was the problem. I swallowed my feelings along with my wine and spent the rest of the trip pretending everything was fine. The unspoken tension hanging between us like the morning fog over the lake. Back in the present. The risotto was finally done. I served 3 plates. We ate at the small kitchen island. Megan perched on the stool next to Tyler, their knees occasionally brushing. Later, as I was clearing the dishes, I mentioned that a new restaurant had opened downtown. Maybe we could go this weekend, I suggested, looking at Tyler. Just the 2 of us, for a real date night? Oh, that sounds fun, Tyler said, his eyes lighting up. We should get Megan to come with us. She loves Italian food. The plate in my hand felt suddenly heavy. I placed it in the sink with a little too much force, the porcelain clinking against the stainless steel. Before I could form a response, Tyler's phone rang. It was his parents. He put it on speaker. A habit of his I usually didn't mind. Hey. Mom, hey. Dad. Hi. Sweetie. My mother-in-law. Carol. Said. Her voice was always warm, like a soft blanket. Just calling to see how you 2 are doing. We're great, Tyler said. Megan's here. We're just finishing up dinner. Oh. Hello. Megan, Carol said politely. Hi. Mrs. Henderson, Megan chirped back. Then, my father-in-law, Homer's booming voice filled the kitchen. Megan's there, Attagirl, keeping my boy company. He had always adored her, treating her more like a daughter than he ever treated me. The conversation continued with small talk, and I heard Carol ask Tyler what our plans were for the weekend. Tyler relayed my suggestion about the new restaurant. I was just telling Nicole we should all go together, he said. There was a brief pause on the line. Then, Carol's voice, softer, directed at me. That sounds like a nice idea, dear. But you make sure you 2 get some time for yourselves. Okay, it's important. But her words were immediately bulldozed by Homer. Nonsense, Megan is family. The more the merrier. I always say. I didn't say anything. I just turned on the faucet and started washing the dishes. The sound of running water drowning out their voices. I felt a familiar, hot sting behind my eyes. But that argument, that feeling of being constantly pushed aside, felt like a lifetime ago. The real trouble, the kind that sinks into your bones and makes you question everything, had started about 2 months back. It was subtle at first. Tyler started working late, blaming a big new project at his construction firm. He'd come home smelling faintly of something other than sawdust and sweat a perfume. Maybe. Or the sterile air of a hotel lobby. His phone, which used to be left carelessly on the counter or the coffee table, was now his constant companion. It was either in his hand or in his pocket. And when he did set it down, it was always screen down. A notification would chime, and he'd snatch it up with a speed that made my stomach clench. When I asked who was texting him so late, he'd just say, "Work stuff." His voice flat, his eyes avoiding mine. The space between us in bed grew wider. An invisible canyon of silence and suspicion. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a Wednesday. He was in the shower. The sound of water drumming against the tiles, a steady rhythm in the quiet house. I was reading in bed when his phone, lying on his nightstand, began to vibrate. It buzzed insistently against the wood. Affrontique. Angry sound. I watched it, my heart starting to pound in a slow, heavy rhythm that matched the vibrations. On the glowing screen, I saw a name, Megan. And then a preview of the text, "Are you still up? I can't stop thinking about." The message cut off. My blood went cold. For 5 years, I had trusted him. I had silenced that screaming voice in my gut that told me something was wrong. I had accepted the title he'd given me, the insecure wife. I don't know what came over me. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and picked up the phone. I expected it to be locked. It wasn't. My thumb swiped across the screen, and their entire conversation opened up before me. It wasn't just flirting. It was months of it. Secret lunches. Late-night calls. They talked about everything, their dreams, their frustrations. Me. They dissected my flaws, my habits, my anxieties. And there were the pictures, and the plans, and the love notes. Each word was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I scrolled and scrolled, a sick, horrified archaeologist digging through the ruins of my marriage. And then I saw it. The message from Tyler, sent just last week after we'd had a small argument about money. I just wish you were the one I married. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the duvet. The sound of the shower stopped. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the wall. As the world I had carefully built crumbled into dust around me. He walked out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around his waist, rubbing his hair with another. He was humming. He looked relaxed. Content. Then he saw my face. He saw the phone lying screen up on the bed. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly pale gray. Nicole. He started, his voice a hoarse whisper. What? I didn't say a word. I just pointed at the phone. He looked from my face to the screen and back again. The sequence of his expressions was almost comical. If it hadn't been destroying my life, confusion, to dawning realization, to pure, unadulterated terror. It's not what you think, he stammered. The classic, pathetic line of every guilty man in history. Then what is it? Tyler, I finally said, my own voice sounding strange and distant to my ears. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The lies died on his lips. He sank to his knees by the side of the bed, the towel falling away slightly. He buried his face in his hands, and his shoulders began to shake. He confessed everything, the words tumbling out between sobs and pathetic excuses. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. He was confused. He loved me. He couldn't lose me. Please. Please don't leave. I watched him cry. But I felt nothing. The part of me that would have felt pity or rage had gone numb. It was like watching a movie about someone else's life. When he was finished, a sniveling mess on the floor, I finally spoke. I need time, I said, the words clear and cold in the quiet room. I'm not going anywhere. Not right now. The silence in our house for the next few days was heavier than any argument. We moved around each other like ghosts. The unspoken truth. A third presence in every room. He tried to be kind, making me coffee in the morning, asking if I needed anything. I responded with single words, my mind a million miles away, trying to figure out what to do with the wreckage. Then, one evening, he sat down on the edge of the bed where I was lying. He looked exhausted, his eyes puffy and red. My parents are having their annual summer kickoff barbecue this weekend, he said softly, staring at his hands. I know the timing is horrible. I know this is an insane thing to ask. I took a deep breath. But can we go and just act normal just for a few hours? For them, to keep up appearances while we figure this out. I stared at the ceiling, my mind blank. Keep up appearances. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He must have taken my silence as consideration, because he pushed on, his voice dropping to a near whisper, as if he knew how monstrous his next words were. Megan will be there. His words hung in the air between us. So audacious. So utterly detached from the reality of the crater he had blasted into our lives. Megan will be there. He said her name as if it were just another detail. Like mentioning it might rain. A part of me, the part that hadn't been hollowed out and cauterized, wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the lamp on my nightstand at his head. I wanted to laugh until I cried at the sheer, breathtaking nerve of it all. But I did none of those things. A strange calm, cold and heavy, settled over me instead. I looked at him, truly looked at him. For the first time since I'd seen the messages, I saw a weak, terrified boy hiding inside a man's body. And in that moment, I made a decision. Okay, I said. My voice was level, devoid of any emotion. I'll go. The relief that washed over his face was disgusting. He thought I was considering it. He thought this was a step towards forgiveness, a gesture of goodwill. He didn't understand. This wasn't a peace offering. It was an acceptance of a challenge. He wanted to keep up appearances, fine. We would put on the performance of a lifetime. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological torture. Our house, once a sanctuary, became a stage for a silent, suffocating play. We were polite strangers sharing a mortgage. I would make coffee in the morning and leave his mug on the counter before going to the gym, ensuring I was gone before he came downstairs. At dinner, the clinking of our forks against the plates was the only conversation. I focused on the texture of my food, the taste of the wine, anything to avoid the gaping emptiness across the table. The worst part was the nights. I would lie on the very edge of my side of the queen-sized bed, my body rigid, a barricade of pillows forming a stark dividing line between us. I could feel his presence, hear the rhythm of his breathing, and the proximity of his betrayal made my skin crawl. It felt like sleeping next to a corpse. On Friday afternoon, while Tyler was at work, I escaped to my car and called my mom. I sat in the driver's seat in a deserted corner of a supermarket parking lot and told her everything. The words poured out of me in a torrent of pain and humiliation I hadn't allowed myself to feel until then. She listened patiently, without interruption, until my sobs subsided into ragged breaths. I expected her to tell me to leave him, to pack my bags and come home. But my mother is a practical woman. She's a survivor. Listen to me. Nicole, she said, her voice firm but kind. You can fall apart later. Right now, you need to be smart. He and his family, they're going to try and spin this. They will try to make you the crazy, hysterical wife. You cannot let them do that. Don't give them the satisfaction of a public screaming match. You hold your head high. You protect your assets. And you do not let them write your story for you. You understand? Her words were like a splash of cold water. She was right. This wasn't just about my broken heart. It was about my dignity. What do I do? Mom, I whispered. You go to that barbecue, she said, her voice hardening with resolve. You be the perfect, gracious wife. You smile, and you wait. Let them show their true colors. Don't you dare let them see you break. We talked for an hour, planning, strategizing. By the time I hung up, the tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard knot of determination in my stomach. I was no longer just a victim. I was a woman with a plan. even if I didn't know what the final step was yet. That evening, as I was pretending to read on the sofa, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Carol, my mother-in-law. He hesitated, then answered. Nicole, dear. How are you? Her voice was laced with a genuine warmth that made the knot in my stomach tighten. She was a good woman, caught in a family of liars. I'm okay. Carol? Just a long week. I lied. I know, she said. And there was so much meaning packed into those two words. I wanted to check on you. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Sunday. Your presence, it means a lot. There was a pause. And when she spoke again, her voice was lower, almost conspiratorial. Homer is so excited to have Megan over. He's always had such a soft spot for her. You know, sometimes, the way he looks at her, well, it just reminds me of how long some stories can last. It was a strange thing to say. It felt disjointed and non sequitur, but it snagged in my mind. A loose thread I couldn't stop myself from wanting to pull. I mumbled something non-committal. And we ended the call, but her words echoed in my head. Another layer of unease settling over the chaos. Tyler, for his part, it seemed to have mistaken my cold civility for a thaw. He launched a pathetic love-bombing campaign. One evening, he came home with a bouquet of carnations from the grocery store, the plastic crinkling as he handed them to me with a hopeful look. I thanked him and put them in a vase, where they seemed to wilt almost instantly. The next night, he tried to cook my favorite pasta dish, but he used the wrong kind of cheese and slightly burned the garlic bread. He served it with a flourish, watching my face for a reaction. It's nice, Tyler. Thank you, I said, pushing the noodles around my plate. He sat down, looking crestfallen. I'm trying. Nicole, I'm really trying to fix this. To fix us. I looked at him then. At this man who had shared my bed and my dreams, and I felt nothing but a profound and weary disgust. He wasn't trying to fix us. He was trying to fix his own discomfort. He was trying to glue the pieces of his comfortable life back together, hoping I wouldn't notice the deep, ugly cracks that would remain forever. I excused myself from the table, claiming I had a headache. The night before the barbecue, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, listening to Tyler's steady breathing beside me. And a cold fury unlike anything I had ever felt before began to build inside me. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a fresh wound. It was a slow, glacial rage. It was the anger of 1,000 tiny cuts. 1,000 moments of being made to feel small, of having my intuition dismissed as insecurity. They wanted a show, I would give them one. This barbecue wasn't going to be about saving face for them. It was going to be about me. Finally, taking my own face back, I slipped out of bed and went into the bathroom. I looked at the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, her face pale, but for the first time in months, her gaze was clear and steady. No more, I whispered to my reflection. This ends tomorrow. The car ride to his parents' house the next day was a study in oppressive silence. The air was so thick with unspoken words you could have cut it with a knife. Tyler tried to bridge the chasm. He pointed out a new building development. He commented on the weather. He tried to put his hand on my knee. I didn't flinch. But I didn't respond either. I just stared out the window, watching the familiar suburban houses blur past. My hands clenched into tight fists in my lap. He eventually gave up, turning on the radio to a bland pop station that did nothing to fill the void. We turned onto their street. A wide, tree-lined avenue of perfect lawns and two-car garages. From the end of the block, I could already smell the sweet, smoky scent of charcoal and hear the faint sound of laughter. And then I saw it, parked right at the head of the driveway, as if it owned the place, was Megan's bright red Mini Cooper. It was polished to a high shine, gleaming in the afternoon sun like a brazen declaration of war. My heart, which had been beating a slow, steady rhythm of resolve, suddenly kicked into a gallop. My palms grew slick with sweat. This was it. The curtain was about to go up. Chắc chắn rồi. Đây là chương 3 của câu chuyện. Tiếp nối trực tiếp từ cuối. Chương 2. Tuân thủ tất cả các yêu cầu về phong cách, độ dài và tính liên tục của mạch truyện. Tyler killed the engine. And the sudden silence was more deafening than the pop music had been. For a moment, neither of us moved. He was looking at me, his eyes pleading, begging me to play the part, to put on the mask and walk into the lion's den with a smile. I didn't look at him. My gaze was fixed on the shimmering red car, a monument to their arrogance. I took one slow, deliberate breath, unbuckled my seatbelt, and opened the car door. The show was on. We walked up the stone pathway to the backyard, the sound of cheerful chatter and the clinking of glasses growing louder with every step. The scene that greeted us was a perfect portrait of suburban bliss. Tiki torches dotted the perimeter of the manicured lawn, their flames dancing in the early evening breeze. Classic rock played softly from a Bluetooth speaker. A group of Tyler's aunts and uncles were laughing by the elaborate, stainless steel grill where Homer was presiding, a long-handled spatula in one hand and a beer in the other. Homer's face lit up when he saw us. "There they are," he boomed, his voice carrying across the entire yard. He abandoned his post at the grill to greet us, enveloping Tyler in a rib-crushing hug before turning to me. He gave my shoulder a rough, paternalistic pat. "Nicole, glad you could make it. Grab a drink. Make yourself at home." It wasn't a welcome, it was a command. Before I could even muster a fake smile, Megan was there. She seemed to materialize out of the crowd, a vision in a white sundress that contrasted sharply with her tan. She completely ignored me. Her eyes locked on Tyler as she launched herself into his arms. "Thank you, I was starting to think you weren't going to show," she squealed. She pulled back, but kept her hands on his arms, and finally turned her bright, false smile on me. "Oh. Hi. Nicole, so glad you decided to come. I made that potato salad that Tyler loves. The one with the extra dill? It's on the table over there." She patted Tyler's chest one last time before flitting back towards the center of the party. The message was crystal clear: I belong here. I know what he wants. You are a guest. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on us, watching, assessing. I could feel the silent questions, the gossip simmering just beneath the surface of the pleasantries. I walked over to the drink cooler, my movements stiff, and pulled out a bottle of water. I needed to keep my head clear. For the next hour, I was a ghost at the feast. I drifted between conversation circles, offering polite smiles and non-committal hums. I watched the party as if from a great distance, an anthropologist observing a strange and dysfunctional tribe. I saw Megan follow Tyler everywhere, her hand constantly finding his arm, his back, his shoulder. I saw her laugh at his jokes with a little too much enthusiasm, her head thrown back, her eyes sparkling. I saw Homer watching them, a proud, indulgent smile on his face, as if he were looking at the perfect couple. And every few minutes, I would catch Carol's eye from across the lawn. She would give me a small, pained smile, her gaze full of a sad understanding that made my heart ache for her. She was a prisoner here, too. Finally, Carol called out that dinner was ready. We all gathered around a long set of picnic tables that had been pushed together and covered with a red and white checkered tablecloth. I found myself seated directly across from Megan, with Tyler on one side of me and an elderly aunt on the other. Platters of food were passed around: juicy burgers, grilled chicken, corn on the cob, and of course, Megan's famous potato salad. The conversation flowed, light and meaningless. It was also horribly normal. When most plates were full, Homer stood up, raising his beer bottle. "A toast," he announced. And the chatter died down. To family, to friends who are family, and to summer nights like these, it's good to have everyone here. He took a long swallow of his beer. Then his eyes settled on me. The jovial mask slipped for a second, replaced by a look of stern warning. "Nicole," he said, his voice a little too loud. "I was just telling Tyler's mother the other day, sometimes in a marriage, you have to learn to be resilient. You have to learn to get over your own insecurities." He gestured with his bottle towards Megan, who was preening under the attention. "Because people like Megan, she's been a part of this family for 30 years. She is family, and she always will be." That was it. The trigger, the final, condescending dismissal that severed the last thread of my restraint. A profound, almost divine calm washed over me. The background noise of the party faded away into a dull hum. I slowly, deliberately, placed my fork down on my plate. The small clink of metal on ceramic sounded like a gunshot in the sudden quiet that fell over the table as everyone turned to look at me. I raised my head and met Homer's arrogant gaze. My voice, when it came out, was not a shout. It was not a sob. It was a perfectly level, chillingly clear statement of fact. I would be perfectly happy to get over it. "Homer." I paused, letting the silence stretch, holding the entire party captive. If she wasn't sleeping with my husband. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass. The chirping of the crickets in the bushes suddenly sounded like a roaring symphony. Megan's face went from a triumphant smirk to a ghostly white in a split second. Tyler looked like he was going to be physically sick, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Across the table, Carol's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and something else. Davening realization. Tyler was the first to break the spell, his voice a panicked squeak. "Nicole, what are you talking about? Are you drunk?" Homer slammed his beer bottle down on the table, making everyone jump. "Nicole, that is enough. How dare you make such a disgusting, baseless accusation in my home?" "Baseless?" I asked. A single, humorless laugh escaping my lips. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I kept my eyes locked on Homer. "Is it baseless, Homer, or is it just inconvenient? Shall I share some of the details with the family? I'm sure everyone would love to hear about the text messages, like the one Tyler sent Megan from our bed at 2 in the morning last week, telling her he couldn't stop thinking about her. Or perhaps Megan's reply, where she described, in quite vivid detail, what she planned to do with him in his hotel room on his next business trip. A collective gasp went through the table. Megan looked like I had physically struck her. She stammered, That's not true. She's making it up. She's crazy." But the truth has a certain ring to it. And the panicked look on Tyler's face was all the confirmation anyone needed. And then, the unexpected, Carol shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the stone patio. But her fury wasn't aimed at me. It was a laser beam directed straight at her son. Tular Henderson. You look me in the eye and tell me she's lying. Her voice shook with a rage I had never seen from her before. Tyler couldn't meet her gaze. He just stared down at his plate. His silence a confession. Carol's head whipped around to Megan. And you, who ate at our table since you were a little girl, how could you do this to her? How could you do this to our family? Homer stood up then, his face puce with rage. He pointed a trembling finger at me. I said, "That is enough. This is a private family matter. A man makes a mistake. He makes a mistake. It happens. You do not have the right to air our dirty laundry and humiliate this family in front of everyone." His words, his hypocritical, misogynistic, self-serving words, were the most beautiful gift he could have ever given me. He had just proven my entire point. He had revealed the rot at the core of their perfect family. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt something like pity for him. "You're right," I said calmly. "It's not my laundry to air." I pushed my chair back and stood up, my movements fluid and unhurried. "I'm done. Thank you for dinner." I turned my back on the tableau of shock and horror on my weeping, pathetic husband, on his disgraced mistress, on his furious, red-faced father, and on his heartbroken, newly awakened mother. I walked across the lawn, past the tiki torches and the abandoned grill, my head held high. I didn't run. I walked. I could feel every eye on my back, but I didn't look back. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months was gone, replaced by a strange, exhilarating lightness. I reached my car, the quiet of the empty street, a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. My hands were perfectly steady as I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. I closed the door, shutting out the world. I sat there for a long moment, just breathing. In, out. Then, my phone, which I'd left on the passenger seat, began to ring, its shrill sound ripping through the silence. I glanced at the screen. It was Carol. My finger hovered over the ignore button, but something made me answer. "Hello." Her voice came through the speaker, strained and trembling, but underscored with a new, steely resolve. "Nicole, don't go home. Meet me. The coffee shop on Main Street. In 20 minutes. She took a ragged breath. "Please. We need to talk. I think you just blew the lid off something much bigger than an affair." My thumb was still hovering over the end call button when her words finally registered, cutting through the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Something much bigger than an affair. My own personal earthquake. The one that had just leveled my entire life. Suddenly felt like a mere tremor before a much larger cataclysm. I didn't understand, but the chilling certainty in her voice left no room for questions. "I'm on my way," I said, and started the car. The 20-minute drive to Main Street felt both infinitely long and terrifyingly short. My mind was a frantic scramble of possibilities, each one more outlandish than the last. What could possibly be bigger? Financial crimes, a secret illness. My brain couldn't form a coherent theory. I drove on autopilot, navigating the familiar streets of the town that now felt alien to me. The world outside my car was infuriatingly normal: teenagers on bikes, a couple walking their dog, families heading home after their own, presumably less disastrous, Sunday dinners. I found the coffee shop, a cozy-looking place with warm light spilling out onto the dark sidewalk. I parked across the street and took a moment to compose myself, watching the door. A few minutes later, Carol's car pulled into a spot a few down from the shop. She got out, and even from a distance, I could see she looked 10 years older than she had 2 hours ago. Her shoulders were slumped, her movements heavy, as if she were wading through water. She disappeared inside. I took one last deep breath and followed. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. The air inside was thick with the rich, comforting smell of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. Carol was sitting in a booth in the far corner, away from the few other patrons. She had a steaming mug clutched in both hands, her knuckles white. I slid into the seat opposite her. She looked up, and her eyes were a roadmap of pain. They were red-rimmed and exhausted. But beneath the sorrow, there was a flicker of something new, a hard, flinty glint I'd never seen before. "Thank you for coming, Nicole," she said, her voice raspy. "Of course," I replied. "Carol, what is going on? What did you mean on the phone?" She took a shaky sip of her coffee, her hands trembling so much the ceramic rattled against the saucer. "For 35 years," she began, her gaze fixed on the dark liquid in her mug, "I have played the part. The supportive wife, the gracious hostess, the silent partner. I have known, on some level, that Homer was not a faithful man. There were business trips that lasted too long, late-night meetings I was never told about, the scent of a perfume on his suit jacket that wasn't mine. I would find things, confront him, and he would lie with such conviction, such righteous indignation, that he would make me feel crazy for even asking. He would tell me I was being insecure. That word, I've heard that word a lot." She looked up at me, and a bitter, knowing look passed between us. We were members of the same sad club. "I learned to stop asking," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It was easier. I had you. I had Tyler. I had my home. I told myself it was enough. I buried it. But tonight, when you stood up and said what you said, your courage, Nicole, it was like a key turning a lock on a door I had forgotten was even there. And everything I had buried came rushing back out." She paused, taking another deep breath. This was it. The real reason she had called me here. Homer has always had a blind spot for Megan. He defends her. He spoils her. He looks at her with this baffling pride. I always thought it was because she was his son's best friend. But there was another reason. Wasn't there? She looked directly at me now, her eyes boring into mine. Megan's mother, Sharon. We were all friends. A long time ago. She and Homer, they had an affair. It was about 30 years ago. It was ugly. It almost ended our marriage. It was right before she and her husband moved away. Right around the time she found out she was pregnant with Megan. The air left my lungs in a rush. The puzzle pieces, scattered and meaningless before, slammed into place with sickening clarity. Homer's constant refrain of, "She is family," his over-the-top affection, his furious, disproportionate defense of her actions tonight. My strange memory of Carol's words on the phone days ago, sometimes I wonder if he sees the ghost of someone else in her. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Carol, you don't think—" "I don't think," she said, her voice laced with ice. "I know. I've known it somewhere deep down in my bones for years. And I've been too afraid to admit it to myself. My husband didn't just defend his son's mistress tonight. He defended his own illegitimate daughter. We sat in silence, the weight of her words settling over us. A toxic shroud? The betrayal I had suffered, as immense as it was a single, terrible act. This was a legacy of deceit, a lie that had poisoned their family for 3 decades. Finally, Carol straightened her spine. The trembling in her hands had stopped. "I'm going home," she announced, her voice steady and clear. "I'm giving him one chance. He will agree to a paternity test with Megan. If he refuses, if he tries to lie his way out of this one more time, I am calling a lawyer first thing in the morning. And I will make sure every single person in this town knows exactly what kind of man he is." She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cold. "You gave me my courage back tonight. Nicole, don't you ever let anyone make you feel small again?" I drove from the coffee shop not to the house I shared with Tyler, but to the small, warm condo my mother had lived in since my dad passed. It was my only safe harbor. I let myself in with my spare key and collapsed into her arms. The story of the barbecue and the coffee shop confession tumbling out of me. She just held me, stroking my hair, letting me finally break. I spent the next 2 days in a state of suspended animation, huddled on my mom's sofa, a mug of tea always in my hand. And then, the digital assault began. My phone, which had been blissfully silent, lit up with a text from Tyler. "Nicole, where are you? You need to come home. Now. My mother is losing her mind. She's threatening to leave my dad. This has gone too far. This is your fault." I stared at the message, a fresh wave of rage washing away my sorrow. My fault. I was about to type a furious response when another message came through, from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was. "You psycho. You couldn't just leave. You had to try and destroy everyone. Didn't you? You've always been jealous of me and Tyler. Now, because of your lies. Now I have to take some stupid test to prove I didn't F my own brother." My fingers flew across the screen. But before I could hit send, another one came through. It was the one designed to be the killing blow. "You want to know the truth? Tyler told me months ago that he found you disgusting after you got married. He said you were a terrible wife because you didn't cook and clean for him every day like a good wife should. He said I knew how to treat him better. He said he wished he'd married me." I read it, and I felt nothing. The words that would have shattered me a week ago now seemed pathetic. They were the desperate, cruel flailings of a cornered animal. I thought for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the text box. Then I typed out my final message to her. It was short. It was simple. "At least I never slept with my brother. Good luck with that." I hit send. Then I opened my contacts, found Tyler's name, and pressed block. I did the same for Megan's unknown number. A profound sense of peace washed over me. I had cut out the cancer. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. 3 agonizingly long days later, Carol called. I answered on the first ring. "It's positive." "Nicole," she said. There was no triumph in her voice, only an infinite, bottomless weariness. Homer is her father. I closed my eyes. So it was true. The entire foundation of their family was a lie. "I've contacted a lawyer," she continued, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "The papers are being drawn up. I'm done. I'm finally done." She then told me about the chaos that had ensued. Megan had a complete breakdown. Tyler had locked himself in his room, refusing to speak to anyone. Homer was trying a combination of threats and begging, but Carol was immovable. The truth, once out, could not be put back. And then, she told me the final, grotesquely ironic piece of the story. Something she'd learned from a distraught aunt who had called to gossip. Megan was pregnant, but the baby wasn't Tyler's. It belonged to another married man she'd been seeing, a partner at her law firm. The man's wife had discovered the affair and had given Megan an ultimatum: either she would carry the baby to term and give it to them to raise as a surrogate, severing all ties, or she would have to terminate the pregnancy. If she refused either option, the wife would expose the affair to the State Bar Association and ruin both of their careers. The sheer, karmic mess of it all was staggering. Megan, who had tried to steal my husband and my life, was now trapped in a nightmare of her own making, forced to choose between two impossible futures. A few months later, the dust had begun to settle. The divorces were proceeding, surprisingly smoothly. Homer and Tyler, it seemed, had no fight left in them. I sold the house, splitting the proceeds with Tyler, and moved into a bright, airy apartment of my own. But the most unexpected thing happened. Carol and I, forged in the fires of betrayal, had become true friends, allies. After decades of being a housewife, she decided she wanted a life of her own. She enrolled in classes to get her real estate license. One sunny afternoon, we stood on the porch of a charming little bungalow, a new listing I was considering for a client. The air was warm, smelling of cut grass and possibility. Carol was studying a brochure, a determined look on her face. She looked up at me, shielding her eyes from the sun, and a real, genuine smile spread across her face. "You know," she said, a playful light dancing in her eyes, "who knew the worst barbecue in the world would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to us?" I smiled back, a real smile that reached my eyes and filled my chest with a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. She was right. I had walked into that party a victim, a broken wife ready to be discarded. But I had walked out a free woman, and for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't wait to see what the next chapter held.